So I had just filmed this entire video, and then I realized I never hit record. My name is Emma, and welcome back to my dysfunctional YouTube channel. So today I'm going to be talking about the Marconi deaths. These deaths happened between 1982 and 1990 in England. Fair warning though, there are mentions of suicide and some pretty graphic deaths, so if you are a little queasy or if you're sensitive to those topics, this isn't the video for you. Let's get this started. Like I said, these deaths happened between 1982 and 1990 in England. The deaths were so bizarre that most of the time the coroners couldn't actually figure out a cause of death, so a lot of the cases were left as an open verdict. The scientists and computer experts that died were working on a company called Marconi, which specialized in defense systems. In particular, they were working for the US and they were designing a defense system. Now, it's also good to note that this happened during the Cold War. Dr. Keith Bowden was the first man that died. He died in March of 1982. He was coming home from a social function that was being held, and he drove over a carriageway. He ended up swerving and driving off the bridge completely. His car plummeted down into an abandoned railway down below the bridge, and he died on impact. Now, the police said that he was drinking, so he was intoxicated while driving, but his wife refused to believe that. Also, his friends that were at the social function just hours before said that they never saw him drink anything. They hired an investigator to investigate the car wreck. They noticed that his tires that were pretty well maintained were swapped out with old, bald, and worn down tires. 3 years after Dr. Bowden's death, radar designer Roger Hill killed himself with a shotgun. Later that year, Jonathan Walsh died after falling out of a hotel window. Now, the coroner never really gave a reason for death, so they just left it as an open verdict. Vimal Jabahi died after he fell off of a bridge, the Clifton Suspension Bridge to be exact, in August of 1986. The coroner returned an open verdict, but they did note that his body was found with his pants around his ankles and a small needle-sized puncture wound on his butt. So maybe he was poisoned and was pushed off of a bridge. Maybe he was sedated and was thrown off of a bridge. The coroner stated that it was a mystery then, and it is a mystery now. Arshad Sharif was the most gruesome death at this point in time. This death occurred 2 months after Vimal died. He traveled to Bristol, where he tied a ligature around his neck and tied the other end to a tree. He then wedged his foot down on the accelerator in his car and decapitated himself. The day before his death, he was seen at a hotel in Bristol with a large sum of money, and he paid for his hotel room in cash. And it was noted that the cash was higher denomination banknotes, so that meant it was a higher value of a banknote. A relative, when they saw the crash, had noticed that there was a metal rod on the floorboards near the accelerator. Maybe that was used to wedge his foot down on the accelerator. 1987 through 1988 was definitely one of the busiest years when it came to deaths. Richard Pugh died in the beginning of 1987. His body was found in his flat with his feet bound, his head in a plastic bag, and a large rope coiled around his body. The coroner ruled this as a sexual misadventure, but in my opinion, it seems unlikely. Days later, Dr. John Britton died in his own garage due to carbon monoxide poisoning. A few days after John died, Dave Skeels also died from carbon monoxide poisoning in his car in his garage. They noted that there was a hose tied to the exhaustion pipe that ran into his car. In February, Victor Moore died from an overdose, and Peter Papel died from carbon monoxide poisoning. The way that Peter Papel died from carbon monoxide poisoning was less than ordinary. The night before, he and his wife were out visiting with friends. When he got home, he told his wife to go in the house and that he was going to put the car in the garage. The next morning, his wife had realized that he never came in from putting the car away. When she went into the garage, she found his body wedged underneath the car and his mouth near the exhaust pipe. Now, the coroner couldn't rule this a suicide due to the sheer fact that he couldn't have possibly wedged his body underneath the car the way that it was found. So that was left as an open verdict. In March, David Sands did an unexpected U-turn while driving, and he ended up crashing into an empty coffee shop. His car, for some reason, was filled with petrol cans, and upon impact, it burst into flames. The only way his body was identified was through dental records. Similar to Richard Pugh, Mark Weisner was found dead with cling wrap around his face and a plastic bag over his head. This was also ruled as a sexual misadventure. At the start of 1988, Russell Smith jumped off of a cliff, and Trevor Knight died from another car accident. In August, 2 senior figures from the company died from electrocution. Alistair Beckham had finished a day of gardening in his yard. He went back to his shed and promptly tied wires around his chest, put the ends of the wires into a power outlet, put a handkerchief in his mouth, and hit the power. A few hours after his death, men from the ministry showed up to his house and took work documents. His wife was never really sure about what he did at Marconi, but it was pretty suspicious having random men come to your house and take documents after you died. In similar fashion, the director John Ferry jammed exposed wires into the fillings in his teeth and electrocuted himself. These were both left as open cases due to the sheer fact of how gruesome their deaths were. Now, I'll leave it up to you to decide whether these were just oddly coincidental, but Professor Colin Pritchford says otherwise. He was an expert in suicides, and he thought that some of the suicides were far too complicated to actually be suicides. He believes that these verdicts were reaching when it came to answers, and that they only raised more questions. I just think it's really suspicious how these people all died in such a short amount of time, and they all worked at the same company, which was the Marconi company. Maybe it had to do with Russian intelligence coming through, because again, it was during the Cold War. And they did work on defense systems, so maybe they were targeting crucial people in the company to kind of weaken the company and to slow down the development of defense systems during the Cold War. But I'll leave it up to you. I'm really curious to hear what everyone has to think about these. Thank you, Linda, for the idea. Those are very creepy and interesting. Definitely a stranger set of deaths. I've never really seen anything like that. So yeah, that was today's video. Let me know if you enjoyed. Give it a thumbs up if you want to. Subscribe if you want to. I don't control you. And I'll see you next time.